Good afternoon, students. So today's experiment is determination of Young's modulus of elasticity of the material of a bar by method of flexure. So let us understand what Young's modulus is. This is a very familiar graph to you. This graph is stress versus strain, and from your high school physics you know this, the graph of stress versus strain. Here there is a portion, straight line portion. You can see stress is directly proportional to strain up to this point, and this region where stress is proportional to strain is called the elastic limit or the proportional limit. Beyond this, there is no longer a proportionality between stress and strain, and this region is called the plastic region. Why is this the elastic region? Is because if you remove the force, then the object will again regain its original configuration. Now, please remember, when you apply a force, the effect of force can be various. One effect is force can displace a body, and the other effect is force can deform a body. In this case, we are trying to find the effect of deformation of force. So whenever you apply force, the force will try to deform that body, right? And let's say you apply a force, the body deforms, and this straight line region indicates that if you remove the force, the applied force, the body regains its original configuration. That is, it comes back to its original configuration. So you apply the force, the shape and size of the body is disturbed. You remove the force, it regains its original configuration. It returns to its original position. So this is within elastic limit. This limit is within elastic limit. If you increase the applied force beyond this point, then there might be or there will be a permanent deformation in the body, and that is called the plastic region. So in the plastic region, even if you remove the applied force, the deformation in the body will be permanent. But within this region, if the force is applied, then if you remove the applied force, then the deformation is also removed. So this is the elastic limit. So by definition, Young's modulus is basically stress by strain, or rather it is the ratio of longitudinal stress by longitudinal strain. Now let us understand stress first, and then we'll stress and strain first in general, and then we'll try to understand exactly what longitudinal stress and longitudinal strain is. So let us understand stress first. Say for example, you have a body and you apply a force in this direction. You apply a force in this direction. That is, this force will try to elongate the body. That is, will try to increase the length of the body. Let's say for example. So this is the force applied. In general, stress is, in general, stress is basically force per unit area. Force per unit area. So the units of stress must be SI units, let us say. The SI unit of stress must be, force has an SI unit of Newton and area has an SI unit of meter square. So the SI unit of stress must be Newton per meter square, where the CGS unit will be dyne, where dyne is the CGS unit of force per centimeter square. In this experiment, we'll be dealing with the CGS unit. So we'll be taking the CGS unit. So stress has the unit of force over area. So it is dyne per centimeter square. So in general, stress is force per unit area. But there might be a question: if stress is force per unit area, then what is pressure? Pressure is also force per unit area. But please understand, there is a basic conceptual difference between pressure and stress. Pressure is the applied force per unit area. So if say you apply a force, you try to elongate the body, you apply this force, This force per unit area is pressure. But due to this applied force, there will be some resistive force inside the body acting in the opposite direction. That resistive or reactive force per unit area is stress. So please understand, it is not the applied force. Stress is basically the reactive force per unit area. So stress is internal to the body and pressure is external to the body. You apply pressure to the body, but in applying the pressure, there are internal stresses developed inside the body. So the basic conceptual difference between stress and pressure is external. It is applied externally. The force in the pressure equation is external pressure, whereas in stress, the force in the equation is the internal pressure. So if the body is in equilibrium, then the external force must be equal to the internal reactive force. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. So the internal force would be equal. But the conceptual difference is this: stress is something which is internal to the body, not external. And there is yet another difference. Pressure is always perpendicular to the surface area. The force is always, in case of pressure, the force is always perpendicular to the surface area. But in case of stress, there might be stresses where the force is tangential to the surface area. Those are called shear stresses. In this class, we won't be dealing with shear stresses. We will be dealing with longitudinal stresses as mentioned. As mentioned. Young's modulus is basically longitudinal stress by longitudinal strain. So please understand, longitudinal stress is something, a stress that is developed along the longitudinal axis of the bar. So let us say this is my object, this is my object, then the longitudinal axis is this axis along the length, along the length. So any force, any stresses developed along the length of this material will be longitudinal stresses. I repeat, I am drawing again for simplicity. Let's say this is my object and this is the longitudinal axis of the object. This is the longitudinal, that is lengthwise axis of the object. So any stress developed inside the body which is along this axis, that is, it can be in this direction, that is compressive stress. These stresses are compressive in nature, or tensile, that is along this direction. So any stresses developed inside the material which is along the longitudinal axis of the body is called a longitudinal stress. So the forces that are applied along this body must be along the lengthwise direction, that is along this direction or in the opposite direction, but in line with this. Those forces or those stresses are called longitudinal stress. So this is longitudinal stress. And what is strain? Strain basically by definition is change in dimension by original dimension. It is because if you apply force, you are deforming the body. You are changing the shape or size of the body. So in this case, we are talking about longitudinal strain. Longitudinal strain is, that is, if you apply a force in this direction and in this direction, this force will try to increase the length of the body. This is the deformation. So longitudinal strain is change in length delta L by original length. So delta L is the change in length and L is the original length. So basically longitudinal strain is defined as the change in length by the original length. If the forces are in the opposite direction, that is compressive, for example, these forces are trying to compress the body, that is change or shorten the length of the body. In that case, delta L would be again the decrease in length, that would be delta L, and this L is definitely the original length of the body. So that is strain. And please note that strain is unitless. Strain is unitless. It doesn't have unit, because this is also in length, has units of length. This also has units of length. So strain is unitless. So basically Young's modulus has the unit of stress because strain is unitless. So this will have a unit of Newton. Young's modulus will also have a unit of Newton per meter square or dyne per centimeter square. This is the unit of Young's modulus. So Young's modulus, again I repeat, by definition is what is written: longitudinal stress by longitudinal strain. Longitudinal stresses, I repeat, the stresses which are developed along the lengthwise direction of the body. It can be tensile, it can be compressive. And because of the applied force, there will be strain inside the body. Strain is, that is, the dimensions will change. That is, it will deform the body. In this case, either it will elongate the body or it will shorten the body. In either case, longitudinal strain is defined by delta L by delta L by L. That is longitudinal strain. So this is Young's modulus. Now, by definition, this is Young's modulus. Okay, but what is the actual meaning of Young's modulus? What conceptually, what does Young's modulus mean? For example, I tell you the Young's modulus of iron is more than the Young's modulus of rubber. What do I mean by that? Say, for example, let us understand this. Say, for example, I have an iron rod. And I apply a force in this direction. I apply a force, that is, I try to elongate the iron rod. Right? This iron rod it is possible that this iron rod will change in length by a bit. That is a very small amount. This is delta L. This is delta L, change in length. So by applying this force, tensile force, the iron rod changes its length, or its length increases by a small amount. Let us say you apply this same force in case of a rubber band. This is a rubber band. You apply the same force. This rubber band, on application of the same force, will elongate to a much greater extent. The change in length, that is delta L, for rubber band, that is strain. See, strain is basically change in length by original length. So if change in length is more, the strain is more. So you see that for the same force, that is the same stress, the strain in rubber band is more, because rubber band is going to deform more, which implies the denominator is more. The denominator is higher for a rubber band. The strain is more, which implies that the Young's modulus is lower for rubber band. It is a very simple thing. The same force applied in case of a iron rod or a rubber band will deform the rubber band more than the iron rod. So it implies that the strain in rubber band is more than the strain in the iron rod. So which implies that the Young's modulus, by definition, which is stress by strain, will be lesser for rubber band as compared to the iron rod. So basically Young's modulus, what it tells you, if given a value of Young's modulus, it tells you the stiffness of the material, how stiff the material is, how resistive the material is towards longitudinal deformation. So if you try to longitudinally deform the body, that is, either you want to change the length of the body, either try to increase it or try to decrease it, how resistive that body is towards that deformation, how stiff that body is towards deformation. The more resistance it provides to the deformation, higher is the Young's modulus. Because if it provides more resistance, that means the deformation would be low. In other words, the strain would be less. In this case, the strain would be less, or the Young's modulus value would be high. It will deform very low, by a very small amount. But if the deformation is very high, which implies it is not stiff, so the resistance towards deformation is not high, that is, strain is very high, then the Young's modulus would be low. So this is the conceptual meaning of Young's modulus. So this is all what I said. Young's modulus measures the resistance of a material to elastic deformation under load. A stiff material has a high Young's modulus and changes its shape only slightly under elastic loads. So if you apply load to a material with very high Young's modulus, it will not change its shape or size by much because it is very stiff. That is, Young's modulus is very high. A flexible material such as a rubber, if you apply the same force to rubber, it will deform to a greater extent. So it is not as stiff as diamond or iron or steel, right? So this is what Young's modulus is all about. So designing issues, whenever there is a design of bridge or a flyover, or even even your house where there is loading. There are some places, for example, if you look at your ceiling, there will be beams in your ceiling. Those beams basically support the weight of your roof. So wherever there is loading, you need to understand how stiff that material is towards loading. Because when you are loading that material, which implies you are applying force to that material. So whether that material is stiff or not, or how stiff that material is towards loading, is determined by the Young's modulus of the material. So Young's modulus of materials are very much required when you are trying to design something. For example, a flyover. A flyover is continuously loaded with vehicles. So because it is continuously loaded with vehicles, so the force is continuously being applied on the flyover. So the stiffness of the flyover is very much important. How stiff the flyover is, whether it will deform much or not. If the flyover deforms, that is a low Young's modulus, then that's a problem. It should not deform by much. So this is how. See, now in this case, this athlete, this needs to deform, because if it doesn't deform, then elastic energy will not be stored in that, and this elastic energy is delivered to this athlete. So what is the amount of deformation in the material when a given force is applied? That is basically Young's modulus. Again, this one, if this is very stiff, then this particular spring will not deform, and this person will not reach the bottom, and it should not deform by very much so that it breaks. So again, these design issues are very important, and when you're dealing with design issues, the study of Young's modulus, the knowledge of Young's modulus of the material is very important. So the apparatus required, so it's a light rectangular bar of uniform cross section of length about 1 meter, not about, it's exactly 1 meter. So we will use a bar of length 1 meter, which is made of iron, whose Young's modulus is to be measured. So in this experiment, we will be not measuring, we will be calculating the Young's modulus of an iron beam. This is also called a simply supported beam. I'll tell you why. Two stout iron stands are there with leveling screws. We'll show you in a moment. Leveling screws at the base and a sharp knife edge fixed at the top. A rectangular stirrup with a knife edge and a vertical pointer. We'll show everything. A traveling microscope. We need weights. Why we need weights? Because we need to load the iron bar. We are trying to find out the Young's modulus of the iron bar. So we need to apply force on the iron bar. And we will be applying force using the weights. So we have standard weights of 250 grams each. The hanger, which is used to carry the weights. Slide calipers. Right now you won't be needing slide calipers in order to measure the breadth and depth. The meter scale required to measure the length. This is the apparatus. This is the overall apparatus that is there. Now let me tell you, these are the knife edges. These are the knife edges on which, kindly mute yourself. Okay, so these are the knife edges. These are the knife edges on which the iron bar rests. So this length between the two knife edges is 100 centimeters. So this is 1 meter. This is the traveling microscope that we were talking about. This is the eyepiece through which you will look. This is the pointer on which the eyepiece of the traveling microscope would focus. So this is the pointer. This is the stirrup. This is the hanger by which the mass would hang. So this is the whole setup. This is the iron bar, whose Young's modulus needs to be measured. This is the screw of the traveling microscope, which needs to be adjusted if you want to move the traveling microscope up and down. Basically, if you want to move this up and down, the microscope up and down, you need to use this screw to move it up and down, to move it vertically. This is the top view of the traveling microscope. You can see the screw. This screw is required to move this vertically up and down, this traveling microscope. This is the eyepiece. This is the eyepiece. Okay, so this is the working formula for calculation of Young's modulus. I'll explain the symbols that are used over here. But before that, uh, let me go to, okay, look at this beam. This is the bar, iron bar, whose Young's modulus we need to measure. Now, if we load it right from the middle point, we will be loading this iron bar right from the middle point. So this is the stirrup. You can see this is the stirrup. This is the pointer on which we are going to focus. And here we will put on weights of 250 gram each. So the more you put the weight, this will become curved. The iron bar will become curved, or it will take a convex shape. But right through the center of the iron bar along the length, there will be a layer, or there will be an axis which will be unchanged in length, and that is called the neutral axis. You can see right in the middle, right through the middle of the iron bar, there will be an axis which will be unchanged in length even if you hang weights through it. But below the neutral axis, these layers, below the neutral axis, these layers will be stretched, will increase in length. And above this neutral axis, the layers will be compressed. So you can see this. Above the neutral axis, the layers will be compressed, and below this neutral axis, the layers will be stretched. In either case, these forces that are developed, either these forces above the neutral axis or below the neutral axis, they are, please understand, they are along the longitudinal axis of the bar. So remember, Young's modulus was longitudinal stress by longitudinal strain. So in order to calculate Young's modulus, you need to apply forces which are longitudinal in nature. Here we are not directly applying a force which is longitudinal in nature. We are applying a force in the vertical direction, like this. Longitudinal direction would have been like this along the length of the bar. So we are not directly applying longitudinal forces. We are applying force that is perpendicular to it. But in applying such a force, there will be effective longitudinal stresses developed inside the material. So the layers on the upper side of the neutral axis will get compressed. So again, longitudinal forces, and the layers below the neutral axis will get stretched or elongated. That is, but both these forces or stresses developed will be longitudinal in nature. Please understand this. If I draw a particular section, if you cut a particular section over here, this section over here will become slanted. So if I draw a magnified view of this portion, let us say this portion. So this was my section. Now the section becomes like this. So this is the neutral axis. The layers above the neutral axis are compressed, and the layers below the neutral axis are elongated. So the line that was previously like this has now become like this, tilted. Please see that above the neutral axis, the forces are in this direction, compressive, and below the neutral axis, the forces are in this direction, that is tensile. So in other words, you can see there is a couple acting on every part of the beam. So if you take any section of the beam, you would see that the beam is becoming convex, and this section, all these sections are becoming slanted. You can see this. Because it is becoming convex, see, it is becoming like this. So every vertical section is becoming slanted because there is a compressive stress in this region. In all the region, there is a compressive stress, and below the neutral axis, it is tensile. So you can see it is a couple acting. Right? And this couple acting on each section of the beam will try to rotate each section of the beam, will create a torque. You can see this will create a torque. In other words, a moment of a force. Moment of a force is nothing but a torque. So this will create a torque, and this is nothing but the bending moment of the beam. This is called the bending moment of the beam. And we do calculate the bending moment of the beam by M. This is the bending moment of the beam. And it is using this bending moment of the beam that we arrive at this formula. The derivation is not required, but you should know that we arrive at this final formula for Young's modulus by the bending moment, by calculating that bending moment. And please remember that bending moment, this is a torque, a moment. This bending moment is caused due to these compressive forces and these tensile forces. That is, both these forces are longitudinal in nature. So it will definitely depend on the Young's modulus of the material. So by calculating the bending moment, that is the torque acted, we can find out the formula for Young's modulus. And that is what exactly has been done over here. We have found the formula for Young's modulus. This is y equal to gl cube by 4bd cube into m by x. Now, g is the acceleration due to gravity. You will have to write it in CGS unit because we will be working in CGS unit. L is the length between the knife edges, which is 100 centimeters supplied. B is the breadth of the bar. Again, it will be supplied to you. D is the depth of the bar. It will be supplied to you. So this whole quantity, these are supplied values. So you don't need to worry about this. All you need to calculate in your experiment is m by x, where m is the load. And I told you that we have 250 grams load, 5 loads of 250 grams each. So every time you need to load it with 250 grams extra. And x is the depression. You can see x is the depression. What depression? Please understand, if this is the bar, if this is the iron bar and this is zero load, nothing is hanged from this bar. Now, there I show you the traveling microscope. You would be using that traveling microscope to find out. So there is a stirrup on the bar with a pointer, and if you look at the if you look through the traveling microscope, you will observe a cross wire, and the pointer will look as you will have an inverted image of the pointer. Make sure every time you take the reading, the tip of the pointer must touch the horizontal line. So basically, whenever the pointer touches the horizontal line, you need to take the reading. So the first reading would be for zero load, no load on this iron bar. So you take the zero load reading. You take the zero load reading. Then hang a mass of 250 grams, let us say. What will happen to this iron bar? This iron bar will become a bit of convex shape. Though I have exaggerated the figure, the deflection or the depression would be very small, but this is for your understanding purposes. So this has become convex in nature. So this point, which was the middle point, has now come over here. You see, I'm making two big dots. So you can see what is the depression. The depression is denoted by x. So if you again take this pointer and coincide it with the horizontal line, you will get the reading for this point. You have the reading for zero load, you have the reading for 250 grams, you subtract the two readings, you will get the depression for 250 gram load. Next, load it with another 250 gram, that is now it will become 500 gram load. So the depression will also be more. So this point right at the center of the bar is now over here. So take the reading for this point. Again, this pointer will move. Again, use those screws to move that pointer to this horizontal line so that the pointer touches the horizontal line. So that is this position, this center position. Again, note the readings for this position. Subtract these two values. That is the zero load reading and the 500 gram reading. You will get the depression x for 500 gram. The load will be 500 gram. Likewise, you will have to find out the depression for all the 5 loads. That is starting from 250, starting from 0 up till 1250. There are 5 weights of 250 gram each. So this will be load increasing. Likewise, you can take away the loads and take the readings for load decreasing.
As I was saying, that here we are using 2 different types of instruments for measurements. For breadth and thickness, we will use slide calipers. Fortunately for you, that will be supplied in this pandemic situation. So you need not to measure or you need not to calculate those things. Rather, you need to measure the depression for different loads, and that you will measure with the help of a microscope. And when we come to the table, the first table tells you about that measurement of vernier constant. That is the smallest value that can be measured, with the microscope. So first thing, we require the knowledge of the vernier constant. Now, as I was mentioning, that this is your vernier and this is the main scale. So this is the vernier scale and this one is your main scale. Now, vernier scale consists of 50 divisions. Just observe, this is the first line, this arrow to the maximum one. So this one, you can, if you count between these two lines, there are 50 divisions. And if we look at the linear scale, that is the main scale, observe between 1 centimeter, say between 8 and 9 centimeter, how many divisions are there? 20 divisions. Count the number. There are 20 divisions now. Generally, in our normal scale, millimeter scale or the scale we use for slide calipers, total number of divisions in between 1 centimeter is 10. That means 1 centimeter is divided by 10 divisions. So that value of one smallest division is 0.1 centimeter. And that is the least count of a linear scale. Smallest value that can be measured in normal scale is 0.1 centimeter. But now we have divided it, that 1 centimeter, by 20 divisions. That means one main scale division now becomes 0.05 centimeter. That is the value of one smallest main scale division. And another thing we require, number of divisions of the vernier. The number of divisions of the vernier is now 50. With this too, we can estimate the vernier constant easily, because you know that if the instrument is correct, if the vernier is correct, then 50 vernier scale division must be equivalent to 1 less, that is 49 main scale division. That implies that 1 VSD equals to 49 by 50 MSD. Therefore, vernier constant or the least count of the instrument will be, vernier constant. This will be 1 minus 49 by 50 into the value of 1 MSD, which is 0.05 centimeter. So it will be 1 by 50 into 0.05 centimeter, that is 0.001 centimeter. So vernier constant here is 0.001. Accuracy has been improved from normal scale or slide calipers. We can directly measure it also. If you remember that for that we require only MSD, value of 1 MSD, 0.05 divided by total number of divisions in the vernier. That will be our vernier constant, which is 0.001 again in centimeter. So that is how we can measure the vernier constant. Next thing, we need to take the reading. How will you take the reading? For that, we require two things. One, the main scale reading and the vernier reading. So, for that, first thing we'll check. Let us check what is the position. What is the position of the first line of the vernier? So this is the first line. This is the first line of the vernier. Now check the position. This is 7. This is 7 centimeter. So this will be 6.9 centimeter. This will be 6.9, because we know 2 divisions means 0.1 centimeter. 1 MSD is 0.05 centimeter. So this one is 7. Next line, this line will be 6.95 centimeter. So this will be 6.9 centimeter. This will be 6.85 and this will be 6.8 centimeter. So we observe here this line, the arrow. This arrow is in between 6.8 and 6.85 centimeter. It is in between 6.8 and 6.85 centimeter. Therefore, we always take the lowest value. So it is 6.8 centimeter. That is the main scale value. Because we know our reading should be in between 6.8 and 6.85 centimeter. But what is the actual value? That can be measured with the vernier constant. Next thing, we need to check out of these 50 lines of vernier, which one is coinciding with any main scale. out of this all this vernier, which one is coinciding with any main scale. That means if this is your vernier line, this will coincide with any main scale like this. It will not be above or below the main scale line. So if we look, you are observing, suppose this one, 20th vernier. 20th vernier, you observe it is slightly above the main scale line. Slightly above the main scale line. Whereas if we look at the 30th, it is slightly below. Therefore, if we go through it, I think this is 20, this is 25, 26 or 27. Say 26, this line. This line is coinciding. Therefore, our vernier reading is 26, not the value. We observe the reading is 26. That means 26 of the vernier is coinciding with any main scale line. Which line we do not bother. We only check which vernier line is coinciding with the main scale. And we observe that is 26th line. Therefore, what will be the vernier value? This is the reading. This is the reading. So vernier value will be, we multiply it with the vernier constant, which is 0.001 centimeter. So that we get 0.026 centimeter. So what will be our total value? We just add these two. Add these two. So our reading will be, final value will be 6.826 centimeter. You observe, we have said initially that our reading should be in between 6.8 and 6.85 centimeter. Now we are very sure about that value. The value is 6.826. We can measure up to third decimal point because we are using a microscope whose smallest division is 0.001 centimeter. So this is the way we can take the readings. This is a zoom image so that we can understand how it looks like. So you observe here, say 40th vernier is slightly below the main scale, whereas 20th vernier is slightly above the main scale. So our reading should be in between. So next we need to check where it is, and accordingly we will record it. Okay, before we go through the other tables, let's observe the demonstration.
Good afternoon, students. First of all, I show you the different instruments used in this experiment. The total setup looks like this. Okay, and this is the rectangular shape iron bar, and above the iron bar, some marks are already placed, some numbers are already written above the iron bar. Now you can see the knife edge. One knife edge is placed at 50 centimeter. This is the 50 mark. And another knife edge is also in 50 centimeter. And the stirrup or the hanger is placed at 0 position. This is the center position of the bar, and in the both sides there is 50 centimeters. So total effective length of the bar is 100 centimeters. And this is the hanger. You can see this is the hanger. Okay. And this is the iron stand with adjustable screws are there. You can use these screws to make the iron bar horizontal. And these are the loads of 250 grams. Each of the loads of 250 grams. Then now this is the vertical screw with the traveling microscope by which you can vertically align the particular pointer with a horizontal line by rotating this screw. This is the telescope. And these are the main scale and vernier scale. This is the vernier scale. Small scale is the vernier scale, and this is the main vertical scale from which you have to take the readings. And now I show you the pointer. Now you can see this is the pointer, which is inverted actually inverted. You can see the inverted image of the pointer, and just pointer head is just touching the horizontal line. Now on the hanger there is zero load. So first of all, you have to note down the main scale and vernier scale reading for the zero load. Then you have to put 250 grams load on the hanger. So I will place the 250-gram loads on the hanger, and you can observe the pointer is going above from the horizontal line. This is little bit above the horizontal line for the 250-gram loads. Now I make it again. I touch this pointer head to the horizontal line by rotating the vertical screw of the traveling microscope. Now it is close to horizontal line. Now it is touching the horizontal line again. So for this 250 grams load, I make it actually this pointer head is touching the horizontal line after the 250-gram load is given in the hanger. Then again you have to note down the main scale reading and vernier scale reading for this. So this is the first step. Again, you have to put another 250-gram loads on the hanger. So the total load will be on the hanger is 500 grams. And for this, you can see again the pointer is going above the horizontal line. So you have to make it again touch with the horizontal line by rotating the vertical screw. So now it is touching the horizontal line for 500 grams. So again, you have to note down the main scale and vernier scale reading for this 500 grams. So this is the procedure how you have to increase the load, and for each and every case, you have to note down the main scale and vernier scale reading after adjusting the pointer exactly touching with the horizontal line. Now I show you the main scale and vernier scale reading for zero load. Wait a little bit, but okay. Now you can see the this is the vernier scale, and this is a arrow mark at the below of the vernier scale. This is the zero mark of the vernier scale. This zero mark exactly crossing a main scale. You can see actually this is the crossing the 7.45 mark. Uh, this is the 7.45 mark which is crossing the zero. So the main scale reading will be 7.45, and then you have to find out the vernier reading from lower side to upper side of the vernier scale. So this is the zero mark. This is not exactly coinciding with the main scale mark, so we have to go upwards and just find out the exact vernier number which is coinciding with the main scale mark. So it seems to me the 45th division, 45 number division of the vernier scale is exactly coinciding with the main scale mark. So the vernier reading will be 45, and you already got the main scale reading, that is 7.45. So what will be the total reading now? You have to multiply 0.001 with the vernier reading, which is 45. Then you add this two with this main scale reading 7.45. Then you can get the total reading. So this is the procedure. Now the second load is actually placed on the hanger. First load is placed on the hanger. So 250 grams is now on the hanger, and due to this, the vertical pointer is going above. So you have to make it down by moving the vertical screw. After adjusting this, again you have to note down the main scale and vernier scale reading for 250 grams. Now you can see what is the main scale reading now. The 0 mark of the vernier scale is now crossing the 7.35 mark. So this will be the main scale reading. And then find out the vernier coincidence. The vernier coincidence will be thirty-three. You can see this is the vernier coincidence with the main scale mark. So vernier reading is now 33. So you have to multiply 0.001 with this 33 and then add with the 7.35 main scale reading. Then you can get the total reading for 250 grams load. And if you take the difference between these two, you can get the depression for 250 grams. And you have to continue this process up to 1250 grams.
So what we observe is that with the help of this screw, we can move this whole portion up and down. And what we have to do for different loads. Initially, there was no load. There was no load attached to this hanger. This is the hanger. There was no load attached to this hanger initially. So under that condition, we will find out the position of this tip. So though the tip, as our sir was mentioning, though the tip looks like this, but what we will observe on the microscope, the eyepiece, what we will observe, through the eyepiece, we will observe only this inverted image. And with the help of this screw, our aim is to place this initial portion of the needle touching the horizontal line. That's all. So if we observe that initially it was below or above the horizontal line, then by adjusting the screw of the microscope, we'll make it sure that the tip is just touching the horizontal line. That's all. Then we take the main scale value, vernier value, and get the total. Then we need to add some load, say 250 gram. And when we add some load, then what we'll observe? We'll observe that the tip will be shifted. So in the inverted image, we'll observe it is shifted from the horizontal line. So what we have to do? We'll make sure that it will come back to that position again. So we'll make sure that it will come back to that position again by rotating this screw. And when you rotate, then obviously the main scale and the vernier scale value will be changed. We need to take that value of main scale and vernier for that load, and we'll continue the process. So once we get the vernier constant, then so again this is the first load, first table, 50 divisions of the vernier coinciding with 49 divisions of the main scale, and value of one smallest division is 0.05, so that we can calculate the vernier constant easily. Okay. Now the point is here, first thing, length between the knife edges is fixed throughout the experiment. In the demonstration, we have seen that the length is 100 centimeter. So the table I am using for that length is 100 centimeter. For your data set, it can be different value. But remember that value, whatever value you get here, that value is the length between the two knife edges. This is the actual, or better to say, the effective length of the rod we are using. Next thing, initially there was no load in the hanger, so load was 0. And under that condition, we will find out or need to find out the main scale as well as the vernier value. Okay. Suppose it is 7.65 is the main scale value, and vernier you are getting vernier reading as 9. So we multiply this with the vernier constant 0.001 to get the total value given by vernier. Then you take the total reading, just add these two. That means it will be 7.659. Okay. So that is the value for zero load. Next. So that was the value for zero load. That means suppose this is how the rod look like. So when there is no load, there is no depression. When there was no load, there is no depression. So under that condition, we want to find out the position of this rod, and that position can be specified by this reading. It is completely relative, but still, this is the relative position of this rod at this condition. Now we have increased the load to 250 grams. So now the load is 250 grams. Then again we'll do the same process. That means we'll measure the main scale value, we'll measure the vernier, and we'll get the total. And the process will be continued for all the different loads. So if I observe this table, suppose the main scale value you get 7.65, vernier you get 9. So vernier value will be total 9 into vernier constant 0.009. So total will be this. Similarly for 250 grams, main scale value is say 7.55. 18 is the vernier reading. That means 18th of the vernier is coinciding within the main scale line, and you get the total as this. So simple calculation. In your case, this main scale and the vernier reading is supplied. So you need to multiply with the vernier constant to get the vernier values. That means these values you need to calculate. Simple multiplication, and then just add main value with this one to get the total reading for each case. So what we are getting, initially there was no load, so it is the position of the rod. Then when we give some weight, then say this is how the rod looks like. So initially that was the position, and the position of this cross is say 7.659. Relative position of this cross is 7.659 centimeter. This is in centimeter. Okay, this is in centimeter. Therefore, it is also in centimeter. Now, so this is when we apply the load, so it will be bent, and under that condition, the position of this cross is now 7.568 centimeters. Okay. Now we are increasing the load. So what we are getting? We are getting more and more bending. Though here, for our understanding, I have drawn it in this way, but actually the bending is so small by our normal eyes, we cannot observe it for small loads. So we are increasing the load, and it is expected that more bending will be observed. So like this. Say these are the, so this is 0, this is 250, 500, 750. So I need another one. See this one. This is the 1250 grams. So for all these loads, we can measure the main scale value and then vernier value and hence the total value. Okay, up to this. No problem at all. Next thing what we'll do, we need more observation for each load because we are not very sure that we have measured them correctly. There may be some measurmental error, there may be some random errors. So what we'll do, we'll now decrease the load one by one. So we are at the maximum load now, 1250 grams. Now we'll decrease the load one at a time. So what we'll do, whatever value of main scale and vernier we have obtained for 1250 grams, we'll repeat it. You observe same values written. Reading when the load is decreasing. So now when the load is decreasing, the last value is same. Okay. We have to compromise here, or we may take the reading again. That we can do the maximum case. So if there is some measurement error, that can be rectified, but we cannot rectify any random error for the last one. Now we will reduce the load by 250 grams. So now the load is 1000 grams, and under that condition, we will try to measure the main scale as well as vernier again. And when we do that, it is expected that this is the point we should get, this is the position we should get. So it is expected that we will get the same value, same readings, and that is confirmed by the main scale reading. You observe same main scale reading we are getting. 7.25 in each case in centimeter. But the measurmental error can be now improved. You observe initially, now when the load was increasing, the vernier reading we obtained was 23. Now it is 13. So in any case, there may be some measurement error, but now that measurement error can be rectified because now we have two observations. So for this 13 vernier reading, we can find out the vernier value and hence the total. Once we get the total, so now we have two totals for 1000 gram load. For 1000 gram load, now we have two readings. That is, this is the position. For this position, I have now two readings. One is 7.273 centimeter, another is 7.263 centimeter. So we take the average. You just add them, divide by 2 to get the average. So that will be the mean value for 1000 gram. That is the position for 1000 gram. We will continue the unloading process. So now for 750, we do the same thing. We are getting the same value of main scale reading, but vernier is slightly changed. We take the average again and get this one. So in this way, for each case, we will measure the main scale, vernier, and hence the total. Now, one thing you must be very sure: for zero load, your mean value should be as accurate as possible within the experimental limit. Because we need this value, we will require this value so many times. We will observe one. So our reading is completed. Next thing is calculation. First calculation, we need to find out the depression. Now we need to measure the depression. What is meant by depression? Initially, when there was no load, there was no deformation. But when the first load is applied, that means 250 grams is applied, then this is the bending that occurs. And that means the cross point, the center of that bar, which is symbolized by this cross, is now changed its position. So the cross is now at this position. Therefore, what is the depression? This is the amount of depression. This is the amount of depression. When the first load is applied, that means for 250 gram load, this is the amount of depression that occurs. So how can we measure that depression? So initially there was no depression. Initially no depression, 0. Then for 250 grams, what? This is the amount of depression. So how will you measure the depression? This depression is the separation between these two positions. So this is nothing but 7.6615. That is first position, and that means under no load condition, the position, and the position when first load is applied. That means 7.5695. That means between these two. So if we find out that separation, that gives us 0.092 centimeter. So that is the depression for the first load. Now for 500, let me change the color. Now for 500, what is the total depression? So again we will measure the depression from no load condition. So this is the amount. This is the amount of depression for 500 grams. So this is the amount of depression. So how will you be measuring this depression now? This depression will be again the position under no load condition, that is 7.6615 minus 7.4620. That is the position under 500 gram. And if we estimate it, that will be 0.1995 centimeter. So by this way, for any given load, you can find out the depression. And how are you estimating the depression? You are estimating for the depression. Suppose you are estimating the depression for maximum load, 250 grams. How will you measure it? You will again measure it from the no load condition. So this is the total depression. And how will you measure the depression? So 7.6615 minus 7.17. That will give you this value. So the point is, to find out the depression column, what you need to do, you need to subtract the position value. You need to subtract the position value, these position values, from the position under no load condition. That means from this value. From this value. Then you will get the depression for each case. So initial depression 0 because the no load is applied, and then depression should continuously increase. And you observe the same. You are observing that depression is increasing with increasing load. So that is theoretically possible, and we are observing the same thing. But whether the Hooke's law is valid or not, that means stress is proportional to strain in the within the elastic limit. Is it so? We need to check. That means if we plot this depression, which is representative of the strain, with load, which is representative of the stress applied, then their dependency should be linear. That means, in other words, depression should increase linearly with increasing load. That should be, our theory suggests that. But we need to observe it now. To be very sure, we need to observe it. And for that, we need to plot it. So we need to plot load with depression. Now, which one will be along x-axis and which one will be along y-axis? Again, I am telling you that in generally independent quantity is placed along x-axis, abscissa, and dependent one is placed along y-axis, coordinate. Now, out of load and depression, basically load is independent because you are choosing the load, and depression, the amount of depression depends on the amount of load you are supplying. So depression is a function of load. But whether there is a causal relation between them, that can be found out from the plot. So what we need to do? We need to plot it. So this is our load depression plot. So again, I am telling you what you should write or draw in your graph paper. So you first thing, there should be a title. There should be a title in the plot. So you can say load depression graph, load depression plot, whatever. Then you need to specify the axis, and before that, choose either landscape mode or portrait mode. Here you observe we are increasing the load with a particular interval of 250 grams. So it is easy to plot. Therefore, what we will do, we will place. So we are not bothering about the load values because it is easy to plot. Therefore, we will place it in this mode, portrait mode, where along x-axis there will be load, along y-axis will be depression. And when you specify the axis, don't write only M. I'm not telling it for physics. This is the basic of plotting graph. And for data science students, it's very, very important to understand how to draw the graph. Because I have told you that you need to draw graphs for your analysis, which we call as descriptive analysis, and you need to show the graph for inference. For inferential graph or conclusion things, you require graph also. That is, your report ultimately will give you show some graphs, because there will be thousands or millions of data points that you need to handle, and it's not possible to show those points. So you need to show them through the graphical representation. And so when you plot the graph, remember, don't write only M, X like this, because M, X, these are the symbols we are using. We know the meaning. When you report this thing to other people, they may not understand it. So you need to write down the whole thing. Load, depression, that you should write. Along with it, whether you write M, X, no problem. Then it will be understood. And you must specify the unit. Without unit, there is no meaning. Here we are writing some values. We are writing some values. You observe there are some values written. So if you do not write down the unit, there will be no meaning. Okay, so this is the thing. Next thing, what you require smallest value along the axis. That means one smallest unit along x-axis, one smallest unit along y-axis. Don't write 1 millimeter equals to 50 gram. It's meaningless. So you should write one smallest unit along x-axis equal to some value in unit. Let me say one smallest unit along x-axis equals to 25 gram. One smallest unit along y-axis equals to 0.00 centimeter, 001 centimeter, like this. So how will you do that? For that, utilize it in such a way that maximum portion of the graph paper, your maximum portion of the graph paper should be utilized. You observe here, our last point is this. This is the last point. This is the last point. And after that point, along x or y axis, there is very small space left. That means most of the graph paper is utilized here. And how will you do that? For that, you check. Suppose you will place 250. Why will you place 250? you may place it in such a way that between 0 and 250 there will be say 10 divisions, only 10 divisions. Then what will be the value of one smallest unit along x-axis? 250 by 10, that is 25 grams. Instead, now you are increasing the number. That means you are placing 250 grams in such a way at that point so that they are in between, there will be say 25 small lines, so 25 divisions. You are now dividing it such that in between there will be say 25 divisions. So what will be the value of 1 now? 250 by 25, that is 10 grams now. You can improve it. Suppose now between 0 and 250 you are placing 40 lines. So value of one smallest division 250 by 40 gram. This one 250 by 40, sorry, 250 that means 25 by 4, 6.25 gram. Now you can write it as 6.25 gram, no problem, or you can place just 25 by 4 grams, no problem. But in situation, suppose you are dividing 250 grams by 30 divisions. So this will be the value 25 by 3. Okay. So it is 4. Now, so if we write it, it will be 8.3333 grams like this. If I just write it in decimal, it will be 8.3333 grams like this. It will continue, and you cannot write it in this way. So you need to truncate at any position. Either you are saying 8.33 or 8.3 grams. So whenever you are truncating it, you are rounding it up. Then some digits you are missing. That means you can expect some errors. You are adding some errors in your result. So don't do that. Don't do this. You just keep it as 25 by 3 for your calculation. That will be better. Okay. Next thing, same thing for y-axis. You can divide between 0 to 1 or 0 to 0.1, say by 10 divisions. Then it will be 0.1 by 10 centimeter. That is 0.01 centimeter. You can divide it. If I can adjust the graph in such a way that in between 0 and 0.1 there are 40 divisions, then the value of one smallest division along x-axis, y-axis will be 0.1 by 40 centimeter. Better accuracy. So we'll always try to draw the graph in such a way that maximum portion of the graph paper can be utilized. That means we can get more and more smaller value along one division along x or y axis. Okay, so that's done. Next thing, for that axis you need to place the points. So how many points you have? You have these 6 points including 0. So don't forget about this 0. So the first point is your 0 point. This one. Next you plot all the other points. So by looking at it, we understand it is a linear fit. So this is a line passing through origin. Now what we need to do is just draw a line. We need to draw a line there, connecting these points. So this is the line. And when you connect those points with a line, the line should be the regression line. That means the line may not pass through all the points, but the total error on left should be adjusted to some extent by the total error on the right. That means total error left and right should be as small as possible. So we'll get the regression line. You know how to draw the regression line. You know the formula. You can utilize that. And you remember it is passing through origin. So you do not require intersect. Slope will be sufficient. Just estimate the slope and draw the line. This is one way. Or if you do not want, you then place your scale, draw a line in such a way that it will be the mean or average line. That means like this. Some points on left, some points on right. So that total error. This is the total error for all the points on left, and this is the total error on right. This total errors on left should be somehow adjusted by that on our right side. So that will be our mean graph. And remember that mean graph must pass through origin. Okay. So whatever be your slope, that means the slope is changed. Different students are drawing different slopes, but in all cases, it should pass through origin. That is the main thing. So this is how we will plot it. So this is our depression versus load graph. Now, whenever we have drawn it, now we'll utilize this graph to find out a depression value for any arbitrary load. The load which we have not supplied. We have supplied few load, 250, 500, etc. These are the loads we have supplied. Now we'll take any load which is not supplied at all, for any non-experimental point. So what we'll do, for a non-experimental point, say I can choose 400 grams, 600 grams, 800, 1100, 1200, like this. Say I am choosing 1100 grams. You can choose anything because this is a straight line passing through origin. At any point, slope will be same, but from the point of view of error, we will always try to take higher value. So instead of taking a load of say 300 grams, we are choosing 1100 grams. So for 1100 grams, so this is the position for 1100 grams, we will find out the value of depression. And how we can do that? We draw a dashed line. Remember, the solid line is generally utilized if there is only one line, then that solid line will be given for the main graph. This is our main graph, which is represented by the solid line. Any other line shouldn't be represented by the same nomenclature, same characteristic. That's why you are using dash line here. You can use dash line, dash dot line, whatever. The point is, it should be different. So we are using a dash line at 1100 grams. So this is the position of 1100. At that point, we are drawing a dash line. This dash line intersect this regression line. At this point, again, we draw a horizontal line which intersect the y-axis at this point. Now, if we measure this point position, it comes out to be 0.43 centimeter. So, for an arbitrary load of 1100 gram, the depression comes out to be 0.43 centimeter. So, our measurement is completed. Next thing, we need to put it in the calculation portion. Okay, now since B and D, that is breadth and depth are supplied to you. Breadth and depth are supplied to you in your data set. So you do not require table 3. You do not require table 3. So no need to draw table 3 or table 4. No need to draw this because you are not estimating those values. What you require this table. This table is required, which is the consolidated table. This table tells us the length between the knife edges, which is given to you as 100 centimeter, which tells us the given value of breadth and thickness or breadth and depth. So these are the values given to you. We are not measuring them. Please understand. These are the quantities you are not measuring. So for you, they are constants. So you treat them as constants. What the quantities you are measuring? You are measuring depression for different values of loads. And from the graph, you have chosen a particular load, and for that load, this is your depression value. Estimated from graph. Estimated from graph. So these are the values you have. So now you have all the values that you require to estimate the Young modulus. So this is the working formula. This is the working formula for Young modulus. Now all the values you will know, and we are using CGS scale here. Therefore, put the values. G is 980 gram per centimeter square in CGS unit. L is this. B, D, put the values. M is. If we put all these values, then Y comes out to be this. So our calculator or whatever code you are using, that will tell you some digits after decimal points. So keep those digits because this is not a final report we are writing. We need to estimate the significant digits, and accordingly we write our final report. So this is our calculation portion. So in the calculation we are showing all the values. So here also I am showing after decimal 5 digits. And 10 to the power, it is order is 10 to the power 12 in CGS unit. So this is how we can calculate the Young modulus. But we cannot report it in this manner. 1.85543 etc. into 10 to the power 12 9 per centimeter square. That is not the way to report. Therefore, we need to find out the significant digit, and for that we require the relative error in measurement. Okay. Now, if we observe it, so this is our Young modulus. This is the expression of Young modulus, and the value is this. So if we take the partial differentiation of this quantity of this equation and consider that errors are always additive, then delta y by y comes out to be, if we can just find it out from this expression, we can find out from this expression, then we can add another term also, delta L by L. Okay, so delta L by L, 3 delta L by L actually, 3 delta L by L, then minus 4b d cube minus 3 delta d by d plus delta m by m minus delta x by x. That the mathematics tells us. But what is delta b by b? Delta b by b is the relative error in measurement of b. That is, whenever we try to measure the breadth, then the relative error in the measurement comes out to be delta b by b. Similarly, delta x by x is the measurement. When you try to measure this depression x, then delta x by x is the relative error in measurement of x. But in our case, we have not measured this length, then this applied to us, so we are not measuring this length. In fact, we have not measured breadth and depth also. They are supplied to us. That means we will treat this whole thing as constant. So this whole thing will be treated as constant. So derivative of a constant is 0. Therefore, for our case, when length, breadth and depth are supplied, delta y by y is this. So be very, very careful. The equation, that relative error formula I have shown you, which is given in the manual, when breadth and depth are estimated. But in your case, you are not measuring depth and breadth. So for you, this is the formula. So please note it. Delta b by b or delta d by d will not come into play for your calculation. For your calculation, this is the formula. Only delta m by m, delta x plus delta x by x. So delta m by m is the relative error in measurement of mass, and delta x by x is the relative error in measurement of depression only. And how we have estimated them? We have estimated them from graph. So m and x will be the value which you have estimated from the graph. In fact, what value you have chosen as m? 1100 gram. And for 1100 gram, you have estimated the x value. We have estimated the x value as 0.43 centimeter for the data set we are using here. For your data set, you will get different value. So it is 1100 and 0.43. And suppose one smallest division along x-axis was 250 by 40. And one smallest division along y-axis was 0.1 by 40. Therefore, delta m and delta x are the smallest values along x and y-axis. So delta m and delta x are the smallest values along x and y-axis. So whatever value you will choose in your graph, that value you will write here. Suppose you are dividing 250 grams by 30 divisions, then delta m will be 250 by 30. Clear? Suppose you are making the graph in such a way for your data set that between 0 to 0.1 centimeter there are 50 divisions. So your delta x then will be 0.1 by 50. Clear? So for my data set, the value I am getting is this. Therefore, if I just calculate it, the relative error in measurement of y comes out to be this. Again, I am writing all the values which my calculator shows me, because still I have not calculated the significant. So now both y and delta y by y are known to us. What is required? Required thing is the absolute error in measurement of y. We require absolute error. Delta y is required. So what is delta y and how will you estimate this delta y? Delta y is the absolute error in measurement of y. That means when we try to measure this Young modulus by several instruments, by measuring several other quantities, then what will be the absolute error in measurement of that y quantity? And how will you measure that? We will just find out y. We will multiply this y with the relative error in measurement of y. Both are estimated. So we will just multiply these two. So y is this is your y, and this is your delta y by n. So put the values and get the result. Now when you calculate it, When you calculate it, so these are the three quantities. My suggestion, whatever power you have, always keep it as it is. You just multiply these two. If we just multiply these two, the value comes out to be this. And power remains same. We will keep the powers, we will keep the power of absolute error same as the value. So if y has power of 10 to the power 12, then same power should be retained for delta y. It will help in our calculation. Because ultimately we need to add or subtract delta y from y. So this is our delta y. So now this is the, if I just write it, y is this and absolute error measurement of y is this. So if we just add delta y with y or subtract delta y from y, then which digit will be changed first? The digit before decimal point will not be affected because you are adding 0 with it. First digit after decimal, which is 8, will not be affected because again you are adding 0 to it. But the second digit, that is 5, when you are adding 5 with this 0.2 or 0.02, that means that you are adding or subtracting 2 with or from 5, then this digit, the second digit after decimal point, will be affected. Therefore, all the other digits after that digit will also be affected. So what we'll do, we'll truncate at that point. We'll truncate at that point. We'll truncate from the point or after the point, after the digit from where the anomaly starts. That is from the digit onward, the digit starts changing. But we can retain, we can write that digit, the digit from which the value changes. So our final value will be 1.85 plus minus 0.02. But this value, this 5 is also not correct. This 5 is also not correct because we are adding or subtracting other quantity from it and the value is changing. And to symbolize, we are giving an arrow bar symbol by it. This bar symbolize that this value is not also, this digit is also not correct. So this is the way we can write the final answer. This is our reported result, reported value of Young modulus. When you are reporting your final value of the Young modulus, you are not actually giving a single value. Rather, the range is specified here when you write it in this way. So what you are saying, you are reporting is 1.83 into 10 to the power 12 to 1.87 into 10 to the power 12 dyne per centimeter square. This is the range you are actually reporting. That means any value in between this range is correct. So someone gets the value as 1.84 into 10 to the power 12 dyne per centimeter square, that is correct. This is correct for this particular set of apparatus which have been used to estimate this value. To estimate this value, we have used some apparatus for that set of apparatus. For that set of apparatus, this is the range of y. So within that range, the value is correct. So if the reported value is say 1.86 into 10 to the power 12 dyne per centimeter square, then also it is correct. So that will be the final reporting of your Young's modulus.